Talk to Brooke Eggen today, and I am so excited for that. I actually get to see her on Sunday.
It's so
We talked
exciting.
about it on Facebook, but we're doing a staff retreat to take time to focus and to connect the Lord and talk about the direction of the ministry and how we can just continue to grow and pour into our own selves and be able to continue to pour out to others. And that kind of is what our conversation is about today. Well, not about the retreat, but it's about advocacy and how Brooke has had this amazing idea, along with others, of ways to expand our services to meet the need. And it is genius. I am really excited about this. And I'm just like, this is going to be great. It allows us to serve more women. It allows us to be able to handle the demand and the need for our services as more and more people reach out to us. We're going to be able to serve them and meet the needs. And so you're going to not want to miss this conversation today. So feel free to ask some questions if you have any. Say hello to Brooke. Welcome her. I love it when I get to talk to her. She's incredible. Her and Portia and Naomi and Susie are all in the front lines working every single day. I didn't leave anybody out today. Oh, and Brooke and Dan, no, Dan and Andre too, but they're all in the front lines working every single day behind the scenes sometimes. So it's fun when we get to bring them here for you to meet and see the people that are there on the front lines of Call to Peace Ministries. So go ahead and introduce yourself, Brooke.
Hi, my name is Brooke. Like Lauren said, I work for Call to Peace Ministries as an advocate and advocate coordinator. I took the very first year of advocacy training in 2019 and have been advocating ever since. I live in Washington State and I have 4 kiddos, 2 of which are still at home being homeschooled. So that's me.
Yes, I love that. And you led the Shepherd group at the retreat on how to homeschool and work at the same time,
Yeah.
correct?
Yep. Yep. And parenting traumatized homeschoolers.
Which you do excellently. So I am excited to get in our conversation today. So we're going to start. We've got a couple questions for Brooke, and we're going to let her answer, and it's going to be great. So I'm excited. What is happening in our advocacy support to better serve and meet the needs of the women reaching out for assistance?
Okay, so this is really exciting, and it was totally Jesus. I was reading a book about actually about burnout, and the person who wrote the book was just talking about how their organization that she had worked for at one point in time was overwhelmed with requests. So that felt very familiar. And so then the solution that they came up was something they called group advocacy. And I just thought, okay, how would we do that as a Call to Peace Ministries ministry? And I realized that we could host these webinars that would answer questions that are common to survivors. So things like, is when I'm going through abuse, is this even a thing? Like, or how do I deal with family court? And what is family court? And what are all the dates? And who are all the players? And or what resources are out there, that exist for survivors? And so Naomi and I, got down to the business of creating the slides and gathering all the information. And then we, this past week, have hosted 3 of them. And the hope is to keep hosting them once a month with a live Q&A at the end for survivors so that they can come to these webinars, hear all this great information, and then have some one-on-one, or it's not one-on-one, it's 1 in 20, or something like that. But a chance to ask their questions, and then Naomi and I can answer them live. So it was amazing.
Yes, I heard wonderful things about that. And like you were saying, the feedback was very positive that this
Yeah.
was really helpful to these women.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, and I want to lead into our next question very sensitively. As far as funding, we can't hire another advocate coordinator or more advocates. So I love this idea that God has given so we can continue to serve the needs within the capacity that we have. And I'm really excited about how this will enhance our services. So can we talk a little bit about how will this enhance our services and allow us to serve more women and keep up with the current demand for our services?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the beauty of doing these webinars is the video itself is recorded. So the hope is that as we go forward, we'll be able to host these several times a month, and that our volunteers, because the core of the material is recorded, will be able to go ahead and, host one and then answer questions. live, like as if they were doing, just advocacy questions. And the beauty of it is that if you're in a room, and we all know this, if you're in a room of 20 people and you have a question about something, usually somebody else has that exact same question. So in this, Q&A format, people can ask questions anonymously, and then the people who are there live from the ministry can answer them. And so it's this beautiful opportunity to show, and like, oh, here, this is how, they're asking a question about, how do I, one of the questions we've had is like, how do I find a lawyer in my area? And so we were able to say like, well, here's the questions that we would ask a lawyer. Here are some resources of places that you can look, and just help them kind of figure out that process specifically for them. I actually like shared my screen and said, here's how I would start to look. But that is the same no matter what county you live in, right? So you can see us practicing it. And then that way 20 women got that experience all at once of, oh, that's how I would look for that. So that's the hope, is that as we go forward, this really gives more access to advocacy and helps with that basic information that we just have on, some of us just have, like, we just know these because we've been doing it for a while. And so spread that information around and give easy access to it.
Yes, and I'm excited about this too, because a lot of these women like may not know the right questions to ask. And so it kind of
Mhm.
helps them to hear this other person ask that question, be like, oh, this is so good. I didn't think of asking that, but it helps me. And they don't have to wait for a one-on-one advocate to ask these questions that we can answer and help them in a group setting and help other people at the same time. And so I'm excited about that. That's really cool. So what webinars will you offer?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So we've got 5 that we have on docket at the moment, technically 6, I guess. The first 3 that we've already did. So we did webinars Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week, just, our first trial run. The first one was, is it abuse? So just walking through what are the signs of an abusive relationship? How does that impact victims? And then where do we go from there? Our next one was resources for survivors. So this is the idea of like, how do you find legal help? What are scholarships are out there? How do you find food if you're all of a sudden, before you were a stay-at-home mom and now you have to, work and food and all those things. So where are food pantries? How do we find those resources? How do you find a counselor? How do you, if you need to go back to school, what resources exist for that can be helpful? So we just walked survivors through that. And then the last one we did last night, we called it Family Court 101. So it's just a really high level explanation of family court and the experiences that are general to everyone. And so those are the 3 we've done. We have 2 coming from Andre and Dan. They're going to talk about, the kind of pastors, so let me back up just a little bit and say, like, a lot of women, right? We want to know, how do we do this well with our church, right? How do we help our church? How do we bring them alongside? And so Dan and Andre are going to do 2 webinars. The first one talking about the kinds of churches that are out there so that women understand, here are the kinds of, kind of big categories. And then how do we talk to these pastors in a way that helps them to hear us and helps them understand where we're coming from. So I'm really excited about that. And then we have 2 more that we're working on. One of them is identity in Christ. So, yeah. So
I get excited about that one.
I know. Yeah. So just helping them to step into that piece of, who are you in Jesus and where does your healing come from? And then the last one that we're thinking about doing right now is parenting traumatized children. So just tips and tricks for helping you and your kiddos recover and heal as you've going through and come out of this process. So
Wow, that's amazing. And are all these free? Like, do they?
yeah, that's the amazing, beautiful thing about the way we're doing it, is that since we're going to be able to record them, then we're going to be able to keep offering them for free once a month for people to attend live. And then we're working on an option of being able to have them on demand. They wouldn't be able to ask questions, if it's on demand, because obviously there's no one there, but we're working on a method so that people can either come live once a month and have an advocate answer their questions, or watch it on demand, and then they could send in questions, or we have a waiting list band group, and so they could ask their questions there. So
Wow, I love that. These are amazing resources to women, and I feel like so many of these things, like it's would take a long time for one advocate to walk with a woman through each one of these things. So it gives those women those answers And then when they receive a one-on-one advocate, it feels like it kind of, they know what help they specifically need and how they need help. So it's maximizing kind of the time of our advocates and allowing us to be very efficient in how we're helping these women and being able to assist them. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So it is time efficient. It also, one of the things I really like about it too is that as if you're interested in volunteering with Call to Peace Ministries, or you're already a volunteer, an advocate volunteer, some of us have very full lives, you know, and we're not able to commit all the time to a new person who might be in our lives for a long time. And so this also gives opportunity for my volunteers to be able to say, I have an hour to commit once a month. You know, this is very much like serving in the nursery, you know, like they can come in, they can do their webinar for an hour, and, you know, because they're passionate about this particular topic, and then they can answer the questions, and then they're still getting to do the service work that they want to do, that service to the Lord in this place. But it's a much more, you know, for some people, this is a much more doable time frame. And so that's super exciting. And then also, because we are doing this kind of groundwork, when a survivor enters into a relationship with a formal advocate, some of these questions are questions that, I mean, the reason why we came up with them is because they're the questions that get asked all the time. So this just lays that groundwork so people understand what advocacy can and can't do. They understand, like, last night we went over their role as an advocate versus a survivor. So we talked about, like, an advocate's role is to do this. This is your role, you know, so just getting them prepared for what advocacy looks like. I just feel like it's going to take time off of those kind of initial conversations. And then also, as there is a waiting list, and as these women are waiting, we're giving them more opportunities to not just be out there all by themselves, just waiting and waiting and waiting, but we're giving them resources to meet their need, you know. And so that's the other part that's just, I mean, you know, when you're first getting out, it's so hard, and we don't want anybody to feel like, hey, we don't care about them. So we're, you know, creating all these resources so that we can do the best to our best of our ability, meet the need the Lord has put before us. So
Wow, I'm excited. And can we clarify something too? When you say volunteers, that means all of them will be CTPM affiliated advocates?
yes, right.
Oh,
So they've all completed our 1-year training and have been onboarded by an official, like Portia or I at this point, you know, and they've gone through their interview process and background checks, and they are trained in all of this information in the same way that Portia, Naomi, Susie, Lauren is all trained. And so then that way we have some, you know, I hate to call us experts. I would just call us lead learners. We are the ones who have gone before.
Brooke, you're an expert.
So that we can help them begin their learning process.
Yes, I love that. Thank you for explaining that. I just want to clarify that for anybody watching, that these will be CTPM affiliated advocates. And I think this is awesome too, as we were talking personally about this, because all of us as advocates have different passions in different areas where we feel strengths and gifts. I will be honest and upfront and say legal is not, I get the basics of it, but it intimidates me. But when we start identity in Christ and other things, I'm like, spiritual abuse, I'm like, yeah, I love talking about that. But when it comes to domestic violence, and I love that you're like, Joy, you're talking about it. She was like, Brooke is like our very good go-to when it comes to legal and advocacy. And I think that's amazing. That's the gift that God's giving you. And I love it. And I love that people that are advocates and have different gifts can come in and say, this is my strength. I want to help a woman in this. This is something that I feel is my wheelhouse. Like I love this. And you're able to get an advocate that feels really, I don't know how you call it, specialized in that area. So I just think that's the real beauty of it, is being able to really take our strong advocates in different areas, and you get the best of the both worlds, literally, and being led and guided. And I'm really thrilled for that.
Yeah, that is amazing, isn't it? It's just so cool that God did this.
Yes, I'm like, wow, I love these ideas. So yes, and then how will you guide a woman through these videos and help them process it in an advocacy informed conversation?
Okay, so that's a really good question. So the way the videos work is that, you know, if you come into, it's a webinar versus a Zoom meeting. So it's a little bit different from what some of us are used to. You can see the people that put panelists. So like last night's panelists would have been Naomi and myself. You can see us, but you can't see everybody else in the group. And that's to protect people's privacy, right? So we're in a very sensitive time in your process, and we want to be very, very respectful of your privacy. And so That's why we decided to do it as a webinar format. And then you can come in and you're completely anonymous if you want to, and we kind of explain how that process works. And then there's the videos are somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes at this point. We do plan to kind of edit them down or re-record some of them. And during that time, there's a Q&A box and people can just ask questions. And then afterwards, Naomi and I are there, or whatever advocate is there to answer the questions. And so they can ask any questions they want. We are helping them to understand like this, like one of the things we talk about a lot with legal stuff is be curious. Why is the judge thinking this? Why is your lawyer thinking this? Help them to have a curious perspective rather than a frustrated. I mean, we get frustrated. And you can, please tell me you're frustrated. But when we go back to our lawyer, how do we approach them in a way that helps them, So we just want to be really aware of our own, if I'm already kind of triggered by the whole legal process, which I don't know any woman going through family court that isn't triggered.
Yeah.
Then how do I help them? And so we just give them some tips and say, hey, it's not wrong for you to be upset and for you to be grieving. It's right to grieve these hard things. But we can't grieve them with the judge. We can't grieve them with our lawyer. We need to grieve them with our advocate, our close friends. That's the other things we ask. We mention support groups at the end of every single.
I'll say yes.
Yeah, at the end of every single webinar, because we think it's such an important piece. Community is huge. So does that answer your question?
Yes, and I'm thinking of now Tiffany Lesnick in a quote that she said once in an interview is your lawyer is not your therapist. It will be a very expensive therapy bill.
Yes.
So that I think this is very important, that it's hard because when you feel understood, you just want to start pouring it all out, but they're not therapists, and you don't want to cross those lines because it will end up very expensive and they're not trained therapists.
Yeah. Yeah. And we said that last night. We quoted Tiffany and said that. Yep.
Yeah. Very expensive therapist. That's not a therapist. Yes. So what do you hope women will walk away with?
Yeah. The first thing I want them to walk away with is the idea that God sees them.
I love that.
Yeah. I want them to know that in this process, the Lord hasn't forgotten them, and that the way he's seeing them in this moment is to provide them with these resources.
Wow. That's beautiful. I love that. I love that. So I'm sorry, keep going. I'm just
that is the whole purpose of it. Oh,
right.
And then I want them to walk away. We give them an exit survey. So we're trying to, gauge how effective these webinars are. And we're asking them to be very honest. Please tell us what you think, So I want them to walk away feeling more equipped. Do they understand abuse better after this webinar? Do they understand what God thinks about oppression in the scriptures better? I want them to understand, if it's family court, I want them to understand better, I went into family court having no idea who the players could possibly even be. So then, when my lawyer's saying, we're going to appoint a GAL, I'm like, what? I don't understand, and so we're trying to give them just that base level information so that they have a better understanding of kind of the process and where they're going. And then they just know, now they can ask more, like you said before, ask more informed questions. They didn't know this was a question, so now they have more information to ask better questions. And I feel like that can really help them in their process and give them just, that feeling of, the difference between a victim and a survivor is being able to make choices. And so I want them to feel that they can make choices, So.
Yes. And I love something you said in our conversation about this is as you're leading people through this, your advocates are very informed. Part of advocacy is equipping women to be able to make their own choices and being informed of all their choices that they have. So the questions and the whole webinar is directed, you're saying it's advocacy informed, that it's not led in a way that's telling a survivor what to do.
Nope.
It's still giving her those options like your advocate would, and helping you come and be able to make your own choices that you feel good about and you feel informed about, and you don't have to feel afraid about, because all your options and which direction to go. And I think that's a really unique thing about these webinars is when you're adding that element in, you're equipping them to become confident individuals in the choices that they're making.
Right. Because Naomi made the point, I believe it was last night, that they're created in God's image.
Yes.
And they are able to make good decisions because they were created in God's image. And so that's such a beautiful thing we want them to hear over and over again, is that you are capable of making good decisions.
Yes. And I love this because when you equip somebody to make good decisions and they see, wow, I made this decision and it wasn't as bad as I thought, and I made the right one, and it was the best thing. It gives them that level of confidence to continue to make good decisions and how to seek the Lord and how to seek out other options. Because as we know in abuse, the number one thing is power and control, and decision-making capabilities are stripped from you. So it's that equipping and helping them be able to think through that. And I really like that aspect of these webinars.
Yeah. Yep.
So what impact will this have on our current advocates?
Yeah. So I talked a little bit about it before, but I'll mention it again. My hope is that what this does is some of the advocates that we have who their time commitment is just not one where they can take on new survivors at this point, but they can commit to an hour a month doing a webinar. And I've had several who are like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I wanted and I need in my life right now. And so it's going to give some of those advocates who need this kind of outlet a better opportunity for them. Mm-hmm. I think for our regular advocates, these are conversations like the idea of being curious with your court professionals, right? So with your lawyer, the judge, the guardian ad litems. That's something I teach my survivors all the time. And so giving them that perspective, when like in the beginning, then when I say it again to them later on in the process, they're going to be able to hear it better because they've heard it before, right? We hear things and it takes us a few times to take it in, right? And so I'm hoping what it'll do is it'll give the advocates who are taking on these survivors, an experience where maybe it takes out some of the intensity in the beginning because these resources are available for them to view. They can review. Survivors can view them over and over again. So they're welcome to attend more than once. They can come back, like you said, with the legal. If they have a legal question, they're welcome to come back and watch the webinar again. And then they have that 30-minute Q&A to ask other questions. So I'm just hoping it really makes advocacy a little more attainable for our volunteers, and also makes them feel more confident, because a lot of our volunteers actually watched the webinars this past week, or a lot being some of them, and the feedback from them was this was really helpful. So that was an unintended consequence. There's Jesus being sneaky. So
yes, I love that. And I'm excited to see how all this, how it develops over the next 6 months, and where this puts us in the capability to be able to serve more women and to be able to serve the women that are currently already reaching out to us, and seeing how it better equips them as individuals to overcome and survive after experiencing domestic abuse. I really think this is going to, in so many ways, give them more knowledge and so much stuff that they would learn in an advocacy course kind of condensed into webinars. And I saw a question here, and I did want to make sure we answer it. And it says, how do we find these webinars? Do you want to explain that to everybody? So maybe you're a survivor watching today and you're like, I need these webinars. Like, how do I connect with this?
Yeah, that is such a good question. I saw it too. I'm grateful that she asked.
Yes.
So if you're a survivor and you would like to attend one of these webinars, we would ask that you, if you have not already, you want to fill out an intake with Called to Peace Ministries, and somewhere in your intake you can put, I'm filling out this intake so that I can get access to the webinars. So that piece will get you that's the beginning of your process. So once you've filled out the intake form and we see like, oh, they're wanting webinar information, then we can send you when the next webinar is going to be hosted. And that's our process. So if you were on the support group waiting list, I also sent emails out to everyone on the list from the last couple months. So that was another way to get in. They are intended that this intake form would be filled out. And then there's a band group for those who are on the waiting list. And that's where I'm posting the videos themselves if you want to rewatch them as a survivor. So
yes. And so what about if well, two questions. First, I kind of like in my mind, if I'm reaching out to get an intake and I say I want the webinar, will I still go through and sign up for a traditional intake where I'm doing the initial intake with an intake coordinator or intake assistant to discuss my situation? Is that
yeah.
still how it works too? Okay. And
Well,
then
let me see. Okay, so it's up to you, right? This is the whole thing of like you get to be the decider for your future. If you don't think you need an advocate, then you don't need to. You can just say like, I don't need an advocate. I just want access to these webinars.
okay.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to be able to say like, you get to be the one who decides. So if you don't think you need that, then that's not a problem. But we can then provide you with that. It's just how you get into our system so that we make sure we can track that stuff. And that's just how we're doing it right now. We may revise that in the future. Remember, this is literally day 4 of offering webinars. So,
yes.
Well,
it's very well done. I'm amazed at all of the time and the thought that's gone into this and the planning. It's very well orchestrated.
Oh, thank you, Lauren. I appreciate that.
And I see one other question, and I was going to ask the same thing. So what if I already have an advocate and my advocate's great and I love my advocate, but I'm like, oh, I would love to talk to Brooke about some legal questions. I love to ask Naomi some questions too, and hear their perspective on that. Can I still get these webinars, or what do I do?
Absolutely. So if you are already have an assigned advocate, you can reach out to them and say, hey, I'd be really interested in watching these webinars, and they should be able to send you the registration link. So all the advocates have access to those registration links. We have not scheduled our next ones. Like we did the 3, and then for next month, we're going to reschedule, do them again. But we need to take some time to figure out like, was, the time that we were doing it, was this a good time for it, and that kind of stuff. And given we're on day 4, we're not quite ready to figure that out. But yeah, so that's where we're at in that process, is that we want to make these more accessible. Like I said before, I think we're probably going to move to a process too, where they'll be on-demand webinars. You can watch them without having to watch, without them being live, but that will have an advocate to answer questions. So
wow. And that's amazing. And then I think of too, I guess it's just like Jesus, people are probably thinking these questions, and so he's put them in my mind. However people want to view that. But anyway, what I'm thinking too is, what if I've had an advocate in the past and I no longer really am in touch with my advocate, and I'm farther down the road, but maybe I'm now back in court, or maybe I'm like, I really have some questions about parenting traumatized children. Yeah. How do I access this if I'm no longer in touch with my advocate and I've already been through the intake process and I'm further down the road?
Yeah. So if you send an email to webinar@calledtopeace.org.
Well, let me type this in so it can go both on YouTube and here. So webinar@calledtopeace.org. If you already have had an advocate and are no longer in touch with her, probably. Okay, there we go. It's there. So that's, don't contact that email if you have not registered, if you have not filled an intake form and you already have an advocate. This is for those that are, I'm thinking.
Right. So if you've already been down this process, you have an intake, and that's something that, if you send me an email, I'm going to check. So it's okay if you make a mistake, but I will, then I can send you the information from there, because I have I will be creating a list of people who are interested in doing, another one or so yeah.
Okay. And if I'm an advocate listening to this, do I contact you if I say, hey, I'm very interested in this, or will you contact me?
Okay, so if you are a Called to Peace affiliated advocate, then you should be in our band group, and they are already posted there. So you shouldn't have any problem getting access to those. If you're asking, and again, I've had a lot of my advocates asking, well, what about for my clients? And I'm telling them, we're in process. I'm working on it. We have a meeting in a little bit that actually I'm hoping will firm up what the next steps are. And I should have an answer to that question within the next week. So we're really working on it. So I didn't anticipate, you don't anticipate all the things until it starts happening. You're like, oh, that's such an obvious question. Why didn't I figure that out before I started? But having them be accessible in kind of the situation this lady was asking, like, I've already got an advocate. It just, I don't know, it didn't occur to me. So
This is great. So if you're an advocate and you're watching this, jump into the band group and you'll get a lot more information there. And so this was really helpful today. I hope that this answered everybody's questions that is coming back and watching this. If you have any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I really enjoyed getting to talk to Brooke today and hear about this. And I'm just so thrilled. I love your heart and your passion behind advocating for women and just the strength and the courage that you have. It's just so beautiful, and I'm so grateful for you. So I'm like, we're all like over here at Call to Peace rejoicing. We're like, thank you, Brooke, for putting this together, and so grateful for you. So thank you.
That's nice. It was definitely the Lord, so I'm grateful too.
God is good. I feel like this is God's way of like, he does that. He puts things in our hearts, and he's like, my passion and I see these women and my passion is for them and my heart is for them. And he gets to work through us to download these visions and these ideas into our hearts of how to better reach them, to know God's heart and that sees them and is not leaving them alone and is going to walk them through this. And we are so privileged at Call to Peace Ministries that we get to be the hand and feet of Jesus to so many of these women and to show them God's heart. So thank you.
Huge blessing.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for who joined and welcome to Brooke. We appreciate all your conversations and we appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.